He had survived orbital bombardment, broken bones, and betrayal. But when she, an alien warrior with storm-colored eyes, looked straight into his soul and whispered, "Now or later?" he froze. Not because he didn't understand, but because he did. Ash drifted like metallic snow across the ruins of Helix Outpost. Smoke twisted up from the wreckage, curling through broken towers and shattered steel. Everything smelled like plasma burns, melted circuits, and loss. Jalin limped through the debris, one boot half-dragging, the other squelching with something that used to be a medical gel. His thigh throbbed from a cauterized wound, reopened, from too much walking and not enough luck. Every few feet he had to stop and breathe, not because he was tired, but because this was the kind of silence that made a man wonder if he was the last one left. No comms, no beacons, just ash and ghosts. He cursed under his breath, smacking the side of his visor. Static, his emergency. Transponder blinked red once, then chirped like a dying bird and went dark. Cool. Betrayed by a keychain, he muttered. That's when he saw it. Movement. Through the haze. Jalin ducked behind a bent fuel cell, drawing his pistol, half-melted, and barely functional. His heart pounded. But the figure that walked through the smoke didn't stumble like the mutated shock troops, didn't clatter like a drone. It walked with confidence, smooth, graceful, almost like the smoke moved out of its way. And then the ash cleared, and he saw her, Saria. She was alive. Her pale blue skin was streaked with soot. One shoulder of her armor hung loose, like it had been ripped off mid-fight. Her braids were singed at the ends, but her eyes, those impossible violet-ringed eyes, were locked on his. "You're not dead," Jalin said, blinking. She raised an eyebrow. "You sound disappointed," he huffed. "I figured anyone that stylish would have made a dramatic exit." "I prefer to disappoint expectations," she said coolly. They stood there, silent, two shapes in the graveyard of a war. Her gaze dropped to his leg. "You are leaking." He looked down, blood soaked into his boot. "It's not a performance piece." Without a word, she walked toward him, kneeling beside his leg. Her touch was firm, no hesitation. She pulled a synth seal tube from her belt and sprayed the wound. "Ha! What is that?" he barked, twitching like a live wire. "Military-grade nano-sealant," she said, "also mildly adhesive." "You just glued my skin shut." "You're welcome." He stood slowly, testing the leg. It held. Barely. "So, you're good at first aid, sarcasm, and surviving orbital strikes," he said. "Anything you can't do? Appreciate human cuisine." Fair. Together they made their way to what was left of the ops shelter. 3 walls, half a roof, and a ration pack that still played a cheerful jingle when opened, like everything wasn't on fire. She opened a synth fruit bar, sniffed it, grimaced. "This tastes like betrayal." "Welcome to the flavor of Earth," he said, biting into his. "We call that raspberry." They sat down in the ash-dusted ruin, side by side. For a while, neither said anything. Then their eyes met. The war was gone, the gunfire silenced. But something else had started here. Something smaller, stranger. It showed up in quiet looks and hands that didn't flinch and a closeness that hadn't been earned, but somehow still felt right. And that's when she leaned in just slightly, not touching him, not smiling, just watching him, and in a voice that barely rose above the breeze, she whispered, "Do you want me, now or later?" Jalin blinked. Time stopped. His mouth opened, but no words came. Because deep down, he already knew his answer, and it terrified him. Jalin stared at the spot where she'd whispered those 3 words. Now or later, that voice, that look. It hadn't been casual. It couldn't have been, unless it was. Unless he'd misunderstood. Spectacularly, and now she was acting like it never happened. He limped after her as she climbed the fractured edge of the shelter wall, wedging a broken antenna in place to hold the makeshift roof. Her fingers moved with exact precision, tightening, clamps, twisting wire, checking tension. She didn't look at him once, so, Jalin said, trying to sound casual. Do aliens always flirt by emotionally destroying the guy? Or was that a special occasion? Nothing. She didn't even blink. He kept going, not judging, just trying to learn the customs, for science. Still nothing. He muttered under his breath. If she breaks my heart, I'm blaming xenocultural misunderstandings. Soraya climbed down and walked past him without a word, dropping a spare blanket onto his lap like she'd planned to all along. He tried again. We could make a trade. I explain Earth romance. You explain whatever that was. Define romance, she said flatly, adjusting her gauntlet. Well, he said, sitting up straighter. Romance is awkward confessions, regret, holding hands too soon, saying the wrong thing at the worst possible time, emotional chaos, and chocolate. She paused. What is chocolate? His jaw dropped. Wait, you've never had chocolate? She tilted her head. Is it a weapon? He stared. Only against sadness. They argued about food for 10 full minutes. She described protein spheres and frictionless meals. He made gagging sounds. She told him Earth food was inefficient and disturbing. He told her alien food had the emotional warmth of a printer manual. By the time they stopped talking, it was dark. The ash had settled. Wind howled gently through the broken supports above. They sat across from each other, wrapped in thin thermal blankets, not quite touching. Jalin's leg still hurt, but she'd stabilized it with more of that alien glue. He wanted to thank her, but instead he said, You know you're terrifying, right? She blinked. Because I help you not die? No. Because you do everything perfectly while I keep trying to win your respect with sarcasm and nerve damage. Soraya didn't answer. Just gave him a quiet, unreadable look. That silence filled something between them. Then she spoke. Quietly. Why are you really still here? Jalin flinched. What do you mean? You missed evacuation by 2 hours. He looked down at his boot. Yeah, well, maybe I got my times mixed up. That seems unlikely. He hesitated, then admitted. Okay. I read the evac schedule wrong. Base 12 still fries my brain. You stayed because of a math error? I mean, yeah. But it felt noble at the time. She was quiet for a moment. Then, to his surprise, her lips twitched just a little. Not quite a smile, but close. She turned back to her work, rewiring the comm relay with alien tools and calm hands. Later that night, after they'd shared the last of the ration cubes, hers suspicious of the jelly texture, his disgusted by the hot protein mush, they sat back in silence. Jalin stared, up through the cracks in the ceiling, watching faint stars blink through drifting smoke. Soraya sat cross-legged by the heat coil, her armor gauntlet plugged into a buzzing wire. She was humming, softly, strange and low, something between a lullaby and a chant. He tilted his head. Are you singing? She froze. The hum stopped. No. He smiled faintly. Sounded like singing. I was calibrating my vocal frequencies. Right. And I chew gum for medical reasons. Soraya didn't respond, but her eyes sparkled just slightly. Not with humor exactly, with something quieter. Something that almost felt like trust. He watched her as she worked, light catching on the edges of her cracked armor. She moved like a warrior, thought like a scientist. But when she closed her eyes for just a moment, she looked like someone lost. And Jalin realized something he hadn't admitted before, not even to himself. He didn't want to be rescued anymore, if it meant leaving her behind. Morning came slow and gray. The sun, if it was even still there, was hidden behind smoke and cloud. The world felt like it was holding its breath. The comms tower blinked faintly in the distance, half buried in rubble and twisted girders, just far enough to be a problem. Jalin adjusted his leg brace and squinted through the haze. You sure that thing still works? Unknown, Surya said. But it's our only option. They scanned for a path forward, and that's when they saw it. The ground, once cracked stone and carbon paneling, was now pulsing with something alive. Red, vines had slithered up through the rubble. They glowed faintly, twitching toward movement like they could smell them. Wet, spreading fast, alien, aggressive. Jalin frowned. That wasn't there yesterday. Correct, she said, crouching near the edge. The vines recoiled from her gloved hand. Photosensitive, she murmured. Possibly xenonoiotic. Not native to this sector. Translation? He asked, slowly stepping back. They may consume us. Neat, Jalin muttered. I left my flamethrower in my other pants. Surya didn't laugh. Instead, she pulled a small spherical device from her hip pouch. It pulsed amber. What's that? He asked. Atmospheric disruptor. Compression wave tuned to disable low root. Oxygen sensors, Jalin blinked. So, an alien weed killer? I carry solutions. You carry sarcasm. And meat sticks, he added. Don't forget the meat sticks. She activated the device and rolled it across the rubble. It pulsed once, twice, then released a soft thud. A shockwave rippled out like a low roar. The vines curled inward, shrieking in silence, withdrawing into the cracks they'd emerged from. Jalin whistled. You sure you're not some kind of poetry ninja? Ninjas are a myth. Exactly what a ninja would say. The path ahead was now clear, if unstable. They walked side by side, picking their way through scorched panels and rusted bulkheads. His limp slowed them, but Surya adjusted her pace without comment. Back home, Jalin said, breaking the silence. I used to complain about water pressure. She raised a brow. Explain. I miss real showers, not sonic mist, not water recycling pods, just hot, wasteful paint-stripping showers and burgers. Greasy, overcooked, probably dangerous burgers. She considered this. We use sonic mist baths. Efficient. Frictionless. That's the problem, he said. You haven't lived until a stream of angry boiling water almost takes your skin off. She gave him a look that said humans are insane. But she was listening. And you? He asked, voice softer. What do you miss? She hesitated. Then answered slowly. Home wind, he tilted his head. What's that? It comes from the east. Warm. It smells like metal trees and ground like moss. It hums through your bones. He tried to imagine it. Failed. But the way she said it, it sounded like she missed it more than anything else. Sounds like something worth going back to, he said. Surya didn't answer. By the time they reached the base of the tower, their legs were shaking and the air was thick with heat. The tower was still standing, but only barely. Its support beams cracked, its panels scorched. Inside, the console blinked, dim green. Faint power. Still alive. Jalin muttered, brushing away dust. Just like us. They worked quickly. Surya rewired a relay while he patched a connection using a salvaged comm chip and a strip of foil from a ration wrapper. It's not pretty, he said, but it might ping someone who's not dead. Send the burst, she said. He hesitated. If this works, they'll come. She looked up. Isn't that the point? Yeah. But then what? Surya stared at him for a long moment. Then we go. He nodded. The beacon lit up. It wasn't strong. It wouldn't last. But it was something. Hope. Faint. Flickering. That night they sat beside the weak fire core inside the shelter, just far enough from the tower to pretend it didn't mean goodbye. Surya stared at the flames. Jalin stared at her. You ever wonder, he said, how two people like us ended up here? She didn't look at him. No. Liar. He smiled. She was silent for a while, then said quietly, I came here to kill. I didn't expect to find someone interesting. He swallowed. I came here to fix things, but I think I broke more than I repaired. Her eyes turned to him, soft, unreadable. And now? He shrugged. Now, I'm sitting in the dark with a woman who scares me, confuses me, and might be the only reason I'm still alive. Soraya didn't blink. That sounds like your definition of romance, he laughed, tired and a little sad. Guess it does. Outside, the wind picked up, swirling ash in lazy spirals. The tower blinked once, twice, then held. Jalin leaned back, letting the fire warm his face. You know, he said, almost to himself, you shouldn't matter. We're not even supposed to be allies. This war. But I do, she said. He looked at her. And in that moment, with the war behind them and the future uncertain, Jalin knew something had changed. He didn't want to go back to who he was before, not if it meant forgetting this. The day started quiet, too quiet. Jalin was halfway through explaining why spray cheese was humanity's greatest mistake and achievement when the ground beeped. Not a friendly beep. This was a warning. Sharp, urgent. He froze mid-gesture. Soraya? She was already moving, eyes locked on the half-buried metal shape just ahead. A triangular panel glowed red under layers of soot and broken stone. That's a sentry turret, she said, stepping back. Pre-unification. Old model, still armed. Maybe it's sleeping, Jalin offered weakly. Then the turret rose. It screeched as it unfolded. 3 legs hissing, targeting lens flickering to life. Its cannon swiveled and locked on. Cover, Jalin yelled, diving behind the rusted shell of an old mech arm. A plasma bolt screamed past, sizzling air inches from his head. Soraya moved differently. She didn't run. She stepped calmly behind. A pillar reached into her belt pouch and pulled something small, a broken antenna. Then just as the turret charged its next shot, she lifted her helmet, held it up like a signal. What are you doing? Jalin shouted. Distracting it, she said. It still runs heuristic memory trees. I can confuse it. With what? Interpretive dance? Riddles, she said, stepping into view. The turret's red eye tracked her but didn't fire. Soraya began to speak. The words came in her native tongue, slow, melodic, like math wrapped in poetry. Phrases shaped like questions, then questions that sounded like puzzles. The turret paused, twitched, let out a confused warble. Jalin blinked. You're breaking its brain with poetry? It worked on my instructors. The turret spun once, then again. Its targeting system beeped, then groaned, and finally powered down with a low, exhausted sigh of steam. It slumped back into the dirt like a tired animal. Jalin stood, wide-eyed. You are a poetry ninja. She didn't answer, but for the first time she almost smiled. They approached the turret carefully. A side panel flickered, still connected to the uplink grid. Soraya tapped in a sequence. A display blinked to life. Data logs, transmission history, old records, most corrupted. But one stood out. A message, time-stamped the day of the evacuation. Command has pulled remaining squads. Outpost Helix considered compromised. Soraya Kavana, status unknown. Presumed lost. No recovery scheduled. Jalin stared. At it. They'd left her behind. No search, no signal. Nothing. He looked at her, voice low. You knew. She nodded. You stayed, even after they left you. I was already here. He frowned. You could have gone dark, hidden, waited it out. Why help me? She didn't look at him at first, then slowly she turned. When I saw you, she said, 5 units had you pinned. Your weapon was damaged. Your aim was questionable. I was trying to hold the flank. You didn't know your medic team was already dead. Jalin swallowed hard. No. You were reckless, doomed, and still you fought, alone, without hope. Her voice was soft now, but sharp, like a scalpel. I wanted to understand that. He didn't know what to say. No one had ever looked at him like that, like he wasn't a joke, like there was something in him worth staying for. Then she stepped closer, just a few inches away. Her voice dropped, barely a breath. An hour later, his heart slammed against his ribs. He opened his mouth. I don't know what you mean. Her gaze didn't waver. You do. She brushed past him, fingertips just grazing his arm. But you're still afraid. He turned after her, speechless. The turret crackled behind them. The beacon inside the tower still blinked, stronger now, calling across the stars. Rescue was coming. But for the first time since this war started, Jalin wasn't sure if he wanted to be saved. Because this place, this moment, meant something. And she did too. Jalin worked in silence, hunched over a busted signal amplifier like it owed him answers. He wasn't fixing it. Not really. Just poking wires, swapping dead relays, pretending he wasn't replaying every second of what she said. An hour later, you're still afraid. Soraya hadn't brought it up again. She hadn't brought up anything. She still helped, still handed him tools when he asked, still reinforced the shelter, still scanned for threats. But her voice was quieter now, her gaze sharper, her presence distant, not angry, just waiting. The silence between them stretched too long. That afternoon, while replacing a damaged heat coil, Jalin caught a blip on the motion tracker. A soft ping, then another. Movement, he muttered. Soraya appeared at his side, reading the screen. Direction? South Ridge. Could be scavengers. They haven't approached. Yet. They both stared into the haze beyond the broken wall. Jalin swallowed. This place is starting to feel like a soap bubble. One wrong move and it all pops. Soraya didn't argue. She just turned and walked back to her post, her armor clicking softly in the dust. Jalin watched her go, chest tight with words he hadn't said. That night, with the beacon still pinging and their shelter humming faintly, with power he finally cracked, he sat down beside her holding a half-working datapad like it was a shield. Look, I'm not good at this, he started. Soraya raised an eyebrow. At engineering? At talking? Especially when it matters. She said nothing. He rubbed the back of his neck. Back there, when you said what you said, I should have said something, I should have said anything, but I panicked because... He trailed off. Because? She prompted, tone flat. Because flirting is easy when you don't mean it. Her eyes flicked to his. But with you it's not easy. Because I do. Soraya looked away. He reached out, lightly tapping her gauntlet with one finger. I'm trying, he said. Really? But every time I get close, my brain goes, what if I ruin this? And then my mouth says something stupid about cheese or sonic baths. Still, she didn't speak. He gave a half laugh. Do all your people flirt with logic puzzles and soul-crushing honesty? Finally, she turned. But her expression wasn't amused, it was sharp, cold, tired. Your kind hides in jokes, she said. You talk around the real thing, always dancing, always deflecting, but you won't answer the real questions. Jalin flinched like she'd slapped him, and then, quietly, honestly, he said, if I say now, I don't know if you'll stay. If I say later, I don't know if we'll have time. The tension held for a long, breathless second. Then she stepped forward, slowly, until they were almost touching. Her hand brushed his, fingers not quite curled, just there, barely. She whispered, voice like thread, then don't say anything. Jalin didn't, because suddenly, words weren't enough. That night, they didn't speak again. They lay beneath the broken shelter wall, back to back, sharing. One too small blanket that barely covered her shoulder and half his arm. The fire core pulsed softly in the dark. Their backs touched, just enough to feel real. And though neither said it, they both stayed awake a little longer, listening to the other breathe. The warning ping came just before dawn, not from the motion sensor, not from the heat tracker, This one was different. Digital, sharp, urgent. A signature burst. Artificial. Coordinated. Scavenger AI swarm. Jalen's breath caught. They found us. Saria was already in motion, reading the waveforms on her gauntlet. 17 units. Autonomous. Unaligned. They've locked onto our beacon. How long? She looked up. An hour. Maybe less. They moved fast. Jalen pulled damaged panels into place, reinforced weak points, primed the old turret Saria had confused into submission. It still smoked a little, but it might shoot. Once, Saria rerouted power from their life support core to the beacon. A dangerous gamble, but it might buy them enough signal strength to punch through. Jalen tried to stay calm. Tried. But every time the wind shifted, he swore he could hear them, buzzing, clicking, crawling closer. He reached for a ration cube, dropped it, his hands shook. "I've had better honeymoons," he muttered. Saria, mid-wiring a capacitor, glanced up. "You are a walking disaster," he gave her a crooked grin. "You say that like it's not part of the charm." She handed him a spare power cell. "Try not to die, I'm almost used to your voice." They shared a look, longer than usual. Then as Jalen turned to climb onto the shield tower scaffolding, the structure groaned. He didn't hear the crack, but Saria did. "Jalen." The beam snapped. He barely saw the blur of her body before she shoved him sideways, just out of range. Metal crashed down. Sparks flew, and when the dust cleared, Saria was on the ground. Pinned under a collapsed support, one leg twisted, armor cracked at the hip. She didn't scream, but her face went white. Jalen dropped beside her. No, hey, stay with..." She winced, blood trickling from her temple. "It's not fatal. You don't look not fatal." He snapped, yanking free the emergency brace from his belt, hands clumsy. She hissed as he wrapped it around her leg. "You're trembling. You nearly died, but I didn't," she said through her teeth. He paused, hovering over her, breathing hard, and then he said it almost. She reached up, fingers pressing against his lips. Not to stop him, just to hold him there. "I stayed once," she whispered, "because I was curious. About you. About why you fought the way you did." Her hand dropped, resting on his wrist. "But now I stay," she said, eyes locked to his, voice raw and quiet. "Because I want to." Jalen swallowed hard. Then, without a joke, without a mask, he gently took her hand. "Then stay," he said, "with me." For a second, the world stopped. Then the beacon flickered, faint. Dimming, Saria blinked. "The core's draining." "We've got one last burst," Jalen said, already dragging wires toward the uplink console. "We put everything into it or we're invisible when they get here." Saria shifted, biting back pain. "Do it, together." Limping, groaning, holding each other up, they staggered to the console. Jalen slid the last power cell into place. Sparks flew, the panel buzzed. Saria flipped open the final override. He looked at her. "Ready?" She nodded. "Let them hear us." Jalen pressed the activation key. The beacon screamed, one final signal, bright, desperate, undeniable. Then the wind picked up. The ash shifted, and in the distance something moved. The ground shook as the scavenger swarm pushed through the outer ridge. Metal limbs scraped stone. Sensors blinked like angry stars. The perimeter alarms wailed, and then fell silent. Jalen raised his rifle. The turret beside him whined to life, trembling on its rusted legs. "Just hold a little longer," he muttered, glancing at Saria. She stood beside him, limping, breath tight, gauntlet still sparking. They were outnumbered. Outgunned, but not invisible, because high above the haze, the sky shimmered. And a moment later, the evac ship broke through the clouds, sleek, silver, descending fast with a low, thunderous hum. Its spotlight swept across the ruins like a divine spotlight arriving late to a war that had already ended. The scavengers paused, confused. They turned toward the ship and then retreated, not destroyed, not defeated, just outmatched. Soraya exhaled. It worked. Jalan didn't speak. He just stared at the ship, its ramp lowering with a hiss of hydraulic steam. A corporal stepped out, blinking in disbelief. His boots crunched over broken stone as he took in the wreckage, and the two survivors standing proud in its center. "You're alive?" he said, stunned. "We thought everyone down here was gone." Jalan smiled faintly. "We're hard to kill, especially her." The corporal looked toward the beacon. "We've got room to take you both out right now." Jalan nodded slowly, then turned away. "Not going." "What?" He faced the corporal again. "There's still work here. Damaged gear. Scattered survivors. That ridge is crawling with junk code and old mines, and this?" He tapped the turret with his knuckle. "This baby's finally listening to me." The corporal frowned. "You're serious. Dead serious. But hey," Jalan added with a grin, "you can leave us supplies, maybe a decent blanket, and some of those ration cubes that don't taste like betrayal." The corporal turned to Soraya. "And you?" She looked at Jalan, then back to the ship, then shook her head. "I stay." "Why?" Her answer was simple. "Because I want to." The corporal didn't argue, just handed them a pack of supplies and a small portable uplink booster. "Command's not gonna understand this," he muttered. Jalan clapped him on the shoulder. "That makes two of us." The ship lifted away, leaving them in the dust again, but this time by choice. They set up a new shelter beside the old comms tower, reinforced the structure with scavenged plating, and rewired the turret to respond to their voice commands. Mostly. 2 days later, they found a wounded human scout in the rubble. Then another, hiding in the shell of a downed drone. Soraya treated them both. Jalan talked them through the nightmares. The outpost wasn't empty anymore. They patched a busted drone and taught it how to brew something almost like coffee. Jalan named it Buzz. Soraya threatened to reprogram it every time it beeped the wrong musical tone. And at night, when the ash settled and the wind rolled in from the east with that low hum Soraya had once described, they sat together near the old turret, just watching the stars blink through the smoke. Jalan would lean back, arms behind his head, and ask without looking, "Now or later?" And she, without fail, would smile just enough and say, "Later." But they both knew. She had already chosen now, and so had he. Because in a war-torn outpost where nothing was supposed to survive, they had found the one thing no one expected: each other. End.